Welcome to Our Fighting Spirit, the podcast that celebrates and shares the stories of those who believe in persevering over giving up, standing again after falling, and continuing to live and build a life of their dreams no matter the circumstances. Here's your host, Anthony Gigante.
Hi, I'm Anthony Gigante, and welcome to another edition of Our Fighting Spirit, the podcast that brings you everyday people like you and I who wake up and their goal is to inspire others. Today, we have a very special guest. I like to think of him as a Renaissance man. His name is Lanny Cordola. Lanny, welcome.
Thank you, Anthony.
It's really a pleasure to have you today. And, it was funny. I was thinking before we started, we really just got on the phone the first time about maybe 3 or 4 days ago. And I think I looked at the phone when we were done. We were on the phone for over 90 minutes. But you know what? It felt like 5 minutes. It felt like it was a kindred spirit. It felt like a connection, a brother I had all my life, and we just reconnected. So it was really wonderful. So I thank you for that.
You too. Thank you for the time.
My pleasure. Now, Lanny, you're here in California, and you had you grew up. You grew up with when music changed by like decade, right? Or every 5 years of music changed with the sound of the Beach Boys, then the English Invasion, then the heavy metal Hollywood rock scene. And let's get into what music inspired you as a young man. What was your awakening to music? What was the first thing that really got you and hooked you?
I think the Beach Boys, growing up in Southern California and just having a real deep kinship with the Great Pacific, and the Beach Boys really embodied that. Not even so much like the surf songs, but Wouldn't It Be Nice and God Only Knows. And later on they had Surf's Up and just these incredible pieces of music. And then the Doors were also very pivotal. I loved the poetic element and the mythological element that Jim Morrison brought into the music scene, and how he was really influenced by not only the blues, like so many bands were, but also the Weimar Republic, German cabaret scene, and flamenco, Robbie Krieger's flamenco guitar playing. And I'm just like, wow, I really want to do that. Then of course it was Bob Dylan and the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and the Kinks. Love the Kinks.
Kinks, Ray Davies, a genius, and genius.
One of the great anti-war songs, Some Mother's Son, man, what and then of course Waterloo Sunset and these kind of songs. It just, it was just such a mystery to me. It's like, how do you do that? Because I started playing guitar and I'm like, how do you do this? I mean, what is this? What's the cipher here? And it's just, for some people, I think it's just sort of voila. But for me, it was grinding it out. And I do it every day. And now it's becoming more, is flowing. I can't even keep up anymore with the songwriting. And that, so much of that I developed by being, in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, and all these different places that I eventually ended up. But that was the foundation. And of course there was, the jazz, like John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, Lee Morgan, Pharoah Sanders, the modal jazz, if you will, which is very influential.
Foundation of jazz, yes, the foundation, absolutely.
Yeah,
let me ask you this. I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's kind of post bebop and, pre fusion, so they call it spiritual jazz because the themes are all, a love supreme. The creator has a master plan. Music is the healing force of the universe. I mean, if these things don't take you off on flights of fancy to expand your musical and human vocabulary and consciousness, I just don't know what else would be available. And everyone was influencing each other. You listen to the Byrds, 8 Miles High, and that was influenced by Coltrane. In a different way. And then, Roger McGuinn's 12-string guitar was another thing that I just have always, it's just timeless to me. Whenever timeless. I hear that music, it's very,
and as we get older, it's like, they're like symphonies. It's incredible. Now I want to ask you, what was the first song you heard that said, and you said, I want to play guitar? What was that first song? Do you remember? What was the first vision or the first look at a band or whatever, whichever way it inspired you? Do you remember?
My first recollection is Roy Clark, the country guitar
amazing guitar player. Amazing guitar player.
And I remember seeing him on the Tonight Show, and he played with such exuberance and joy. Wow. I wanted to explore this phenomena. So I got to give the credit to Roy Clark. But then there was B.B. King, because B.B. came up, and he was, same thing. It's the blues, but there was a joy in the blues. Mm-hmm. And then when I had the great honor to meet B.B. In 1993, when I was on tour with the Beach Boys, when I went to his club in Memphis, I got a little time with him. It was about 2:00 in the morning. And he walked in, and I was sitting at his spot, and I'm like, sorry, Mr. King. He's, "Oh, no, son, sit right down." And he just couldn't have been any cooler. And I asked him, "Mr. King, can you bestow any knowledge on me?" And he's like, "Well, son, be true to the music, and the music will be true to you." And wow, that's what I try to live by. Now, wow. I didn't for a long time. I forsake it, but music is very compassionate, and it's very forgiving. And when you come back to it, it welcomes you with open arms.
That's incredible. And those words from B.B. King, simple, but yet so powerful. Actually, absolutely. So,
America is a place that it's like a lot of countries. It's complicated. Mm-hmm. Grow up, there was Vietnam and all this kind of stuff. And I really, it sort of planted seeds in my mind. I didn't really get too overtly into why all this was happening until much later. But so I did have a little bit of some animosity towards these kind of things. But when I went overseas, then when I would come back, I would see these great historical, musical, cultural things that had happened in America. So when I would, come back to America after being overseas, I would go to Memphis, and I'd record in Sun Studios, and I recorded, Heartbreak Hotel by, the Elvis song, of course, much different, much darker, and much more in tune with where I'm at now. And then another song I had written called Somewhere in America, which is like it's kind of a love letter to America. And I wanted to record that in Sun Studios, where Johnny Cash and Jerry Lee Lewis and Elvis and, all of the original great rock and rollers did it. And I met this great engineer out there, and just these wonderful people start showing up. And I started writing songs about my love for America. And one of them was called Memphis on My Mind. And I actually recorded it recently in this last December, with Boo Mitchell. Boo is the son of Willie Mitchell, who produced Al Green. And wow. At the studio that Al Green did, Love and Happiness and, all of these great classic soul songs, I recorded Memphis. It's called Memphis on My Mind. Wow. And, it's just one of those ones that just really come from the depths of my creative spirit and a love letter to Memphis. And one of the lines is so I sat down with B.B. King and asked him for a clue. He said, "Be true to the music, and the music will be true to you." Wow. Incredible. So I got to give B.B. a writing credit. So I'm happy to do.
I'm sure you are. Now, one question: when you're in the studio, when you're in Sun, did you feel the energy of those great performers that were there before you? Did you feel something, or did it take over, or how did he feel when you were in there?
Completely. Because I'm playing the guitars in there, and their pictures are right there, and it was and I think the engineer appreciated it, because so many people that come in, their artists come in there, they think they're like reinventing, and they're going to be the new phenomena. And that just has no resonance with me whatsoever. I'm just a humble little steward of the music. And it gives you a confidence, because, I have no illusions that this is going to be a top 10 smash hit on the radio. And it's not meant for that. It's meant to just, express a really deep feeling. And that's what I think, one of the, essence of music is, and I love this saying that, the highest form of music sings of justice and aims for transcendence. So when I finish a song, every one of them, or maybe aim for silliness sometimes too, because that's always a fun way to express some things that are so that can really dig deep. So, but it's all encompassing. You can do whatever you want with it, and but I played that game for a long time. I was in the matrix of the LA music scene, and I just I think when we were talking the first time, I said I had a physical and a spiritual aversion. Like, I can't do this anymore. And so that's when, like, I guess sort of a resurrection, if you will, the old self dies, I love the thing of the metamorphosis of the butterfly. That is I think a very profound, metaphor, because I think so many of us feel like, oh, this is who I am. I'm stuck. I can't do. And the minute you say you can't, you can't. And the minute you say you can, you can. I mean, it's really that simple. And sharing it with, these incredible children that I've been working with for the last 6 years in Afghanistan. I mean, it was in action. I mean, these girls think they're nothing. And now it's like, whoa, they're just, and I teach them about words like confidence, and I go, with confidence comes responsibility, and, and all these kind of things. So,
it's amazing story. And I just want to, before we move into that tremendous work that you're doing, I want to ask you just one question, or maybe a couple of questions. When you were touring with the Beach Boys, and then you had a TV career, you were in Jesse's band, The Rippers, on Full House with John Stamos. Did you feel completely fulfilled, even though you were probably having a great time and you're very proud of where you were, but did you feel completely fulfilled when you were doing these things, or did you know in your heart that you had something else to do?
Well, John is a great guy, and he's a really dear friend. And I made some really dear friends on the, that were Rippers, that are still dear friends to this day, like Gary Griffin. So it was a different, we were all John's buddies. We were part of his posse. And I was also in a band, House of Lords, shortly after Full House started. So I have this sort of, thing with Gene Simmons, this serious rock and roll thing. And then this, this sitcom. At the time, I kind of struggled with a little bit now, but when it really set me free and really embraced it was when I was in Pakistan, 2010. And I was with some of the best musicians in the world in Pakistan. And somehow something came up about Full House. And I'm like, I thought they were playing a joke on me. And I said, because they're talking about, oh, they like this show Full House. And I go, well, you guys knew I was on that show? And they're like, what? And I said, you didn't know I was a Ripper? They're like, you're a Ripper? And I said, yeah. I mean, once a Ripper, always a Ripper. So I was just, they were just so sincere about loving the show. They said they learned about America. They said that they promoted Muslim values. And then one of my friends, his name is Arib Azar, one of the great musical treasures of Pakistan. He's got a sister, and her name is Umayma. She's a special needs soul, and just a remarkable soul. And she loves Full House to this day. Has seen every episode like 100 times, and it just brings her such immense joy. So one of the great, joys for me was to have her make a video, and I brought it and I showed it to Stamos, and Stamos was just flabbergasted. He just like, what is this? And then so he made a video, and I brought that back before we could send them on the computer, because, well, at least you probably could, but I was pretty computer illiterate at that time. So I brought it hand delivered, to Umayma from John, and then they've been carrying on a little correspondence. So I'm sort of a delivery guy between John Stamos and Umayma Azar.
Beautiful. Full House was a very important show to a lot of people, and like you said, still to this day. I mean, I know people that watch it religiously in reruns. Used to know it was on Nick at Night, but I'm not sure what it's on now. But it's still on somewhere. It's an incredible show. It touched a lot of people. So that is, that's another little piece of your career, and of this full career you have, another little piece of that puzzle, which is incredible. So you mentioned you went to Pakistan in 2010, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so here you were, without really knowing what to expect. I mean, I'm guessing here, correct me and stop me if I'm wrong, but you went to Pakistan, and you kind of, while you were there, either you went the great flood. A great flood happened while you were there, or did it happen prior while you were there? So you started.
No, it was. This was about. I was going to go August 2010. I had met a guy. Well, there's a couple of pivotal people. One's name's Mark Levine. He's a professor at UCI. He's also a musician.
Heavy Metal Islam, didn't he?
Heavy Metal Islam, which is a phenomenal book. He's a Jewish American professor who plays music, and he traveled to Egypt and Pakistan and Lebanon and all these different Muslim countries. And he found that these people loved rock and roll, and wrote this great book. I read it, and then I contacted him, and him and I became friends, and we're still really good friends. And he introduced me to a guy named Todd Shea. Todd is another American musician who went to Pakistan in 2005 after a huge earthquake. And he's been there for 17 years with his group organization. It's a nonprofit called CDRS, Comprehensive Disaster Relief Services. And so Todd's the one that brought, he invited me to come over, and then he called and said, look, we're going to have to postpone your trip because these floods are just devastating. And I said, well, I still want to come. I still want to help. I mean, it's not just about the music. And he says, really? He goes, it ain't going to be easy. And I said, well, it's on me. I'm volunteering. He's like, all right. He goes, I think it would be good for you to see it, but I know you're a Hollywood guy. And I go, well, I'm trying to shed that skin. So let's dive in. And that's where I eventually, started my own, nonprofit group called the Miraculous Love Kids. And that's where it started, was in Pakistan. I met these children there. They had nothing, Anthony, zero. I mean, just barely clothes on their back, no shoes. Little boy didn't even have a shirt on, and, dirty and matted hair. And they were just giggling. They were so happy to greet, and I'm like, what is this? And it was during Ramadan. So during Ramadan, the Muslims, they don't eat until the sun goes down, and then they break the fast, which is called iftar. So at this point, it's crazy. I'm seeing crazy things. The weather is quite warm, and I'm just not hungry. And I became a vegetarian. So that's a whole other funny story. I met, because Pakistan. Well, actually, the vegetarian scene is growing in Pakistan, but at this point, definitely, I don't think there was any in there. But so I just took a bunch of fruit, and I was just hanging out with these kids. And I think there is a video called "The Dream of a Ridiculous Man" that's on my YouTube channel, and I've got the footage of those little kids on my little flip cam. And I remember their names, Binish and Hosna, and a boy named Mansoor. And every time I go back to Pakistan, I go to the village where they're from to see if I can find them. And of course, since they're super poor, they sort of travel around. But I go and I meet new kids that are Miraculous Love Kids. And so that was the inception. That was the initial the opening salvo, if you will, of opening my spirit to, suffering humanity, especially through the lens of the child.
Did you feel it immediately? Like, did you go there and did it hit you immediately and change you in that? Yeah. That's pretty amazing. Yeah.
I went to my friend's house that are Sufis, and Sufis are side of the musicians and poets and mystics of Islam. And I was weeping uncontrollably. I couldn't. And they're like, I go, what's wrong? And they're like, oh man, that's your heart cleansing itself, man. You've been carrying a lot of baggage. And I go, wow. And he goes, and they just busted it open for you. You can let it all go now. And I'm like,
that's incredible. It's funny because this whole journey for me on this podcast has been the same. But after we stopped, our conversation of the day, and I went home and you went home, I came home and looked at your YouTube page, and I started to cry uncontrollably as well. Wow. Because the videos are so moving. And it's the great thing about life, if you're open to it, is perspective changing moments, right? Some people aren't open to it, but watching those videos was another perspective changing moment for me, because you had these young children who are in the middle of our modern war. Like, this is our war from 1980 till still present, right? It happened in our generation, and see these children who are just smiling and playing the guitar and laughing. And we're gonna get into all that too, but it moved me, and it really made me look forward to this conversation today, because I think it's incredible work that you're doing. So you're in Pakistan, and how long did you stay the first time when you went over there?
I guess I was there about a month.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember when I flew into Islamabad. It was late at night, and I get in the airport. I mean, the airport now is unbelievable, but at that point it was just like, oh my God, what is this? People everywhere, packed, like sardines in a crushed tin box, and then so finally I hear my friend, and I'm like, oh, okay, because my friend Todd is he's a mountain of a man, and he's just a unique soul that's dedicated himself to not only the Pakistanis, but he's went to Fukushima after that, or a nuclear accident, and he went to Haiti, and he was in after the earthquake, and he was at ground zero 9/11. That's when he found out that he had this logistics first responder sort of instinct. You just kind of discover these things.
Yes.
So anyway, we get to the place where we're staying, and he goes, okay, this is where you're staying. And I'm like, and there's like 4 Pakistani guys and like one bed, and I'm like, okay. So I'm like laying there mortified, because there's, these guys I don't know, and I'm giggling at the same time, like, okay, I asked for it. And then anyway, because it was so late, and the next day he goes, how was it? And I go, is it possible to just get any kind of a room, just with maybe just one other person? And he's like, no problem. We got a room for you anyway. So
that's good. That's good. Wonderful. So you're there for a month, and you're starting to cleanse your heart, as you say, right? Every day, I would imagine you're cleansing your emotional things you see, and maybe the littlest things trigger it, right? I mean, when you see words or children or anything happening, it triggers this emotion. I would imagine. How many times did you cry in the month you were there? How many?
Oh man, all the time. I mean, it was just like, yeah. And then when I went to Lahore, which is sort of like the Los Angeles of Pakistan, and I was with the Justin Timberlake, if you will, of Pakistan. He's like the most popular pop singer, or maybe like Ed Sheeran now or whatever. But anyway, he took me around, and of course, these Pakistani girls were following us around, and he took me to this mosque, and I'd never been in a mosque before. So I'm like, are they going to be cool? I mean, and they're like, oh yeah, just come in. I go, well, I don't know how to do the whole thing. He's no, don't worry about it. Just watch, and people will be cool. And he was right. Everybody was cool. It was a really interesting feeling. And then when I walked out, this little boy came up to me, and he gave me this little book, and he handed it to me like, sir, I want you to have this. And it was the 99 names of Allah. And it's basically just different attributes, like as-sabur is patience, and Rahman is compassion, and all of these different attributes. And so I was really moved, and I when I back in LA and back into the kind of some of the old habits, old habits die hard, as they say, and it's true. And so I was having a rough day, and I saw that little book, and I picked it up, and it came to that, the as-sabur, all patient, and I thought of that little boy, and he sort of appeared in front of me, and I'm like, wow, this is incredible. If you open yourself up, it'll work. Yes, anyway, I ended up writing a collection of songs called Pakistan, I Have a Dream. And it's kind of this a day and journey through, although it was years, but that first trip was pivotal. And that little boy is in one of the songs, and so it's sort of this mystical day. So it starts off with a preamble. There's this great poet that was sort of the soul of kind of the Walt Whitman of Pakistan. His name is Allama Iqbal, and so he had this poem called Adam sings on coming out of paradise. And I was like, okay, that's got to be the beginning of it. And then it was Good Morning Islamabad. And then I went up to the Swat Valley, and that's where that girl Malala was from. Then, up in Mingora, and I went into that whole region. And so, there's some songs inspired by that. And then there was Afternoon in Lahore. And then, so if you go from, Islamabad, then you go to Lahore, and then way farther down in the south is Karachi, which is kind of like their New York. And it's a wild beast of a city. And I met this sort of like, I don't know, Desmond Tutu or something of Pakistan. His name was Abdul Sattar Edie, and just the energy, spiritual energy that he emitted was phenomenal. And I asked him, I said, Edie Saab, Saab, I think is like Sir Saab, is, may I write a song, about you? He's he didn't really like this idea. He doesn't like attention drawn to him, and he's like, and I'm like, so what did he say? And he said, well, yes, you can write a song about him, but it's got to be called The Big Beggar. Because that's what he felt he did. He was a beggar for the poor. And anyway, so that's one of the songs. And then it closes with Sunset in Karachi, and then the song called Pakistan, I Have a Dream. So anyway, that's the creative thing just opened up because I just wanted to document in song. And of course, I've been writing a book about all this as well, because you want to shine a light, on, these things that move you. And each one of us are on our own unique journey. And yes. I highly recommend documenting it however you can. Paint it, draw it, sing it, anything, whatever, video it, just, because you come back and it just takes you back there.
I agree. That's very powerful. I call that the human experience. And that's the word I use now, because everyone's going through their own human experience. And that allowed me to be more tolerant to people that crossed my path. If I didn't understand where they were coming from, then I would say, wait a minute, they're just going through their own human experience. And I don't know what that is. So I need to understand that maybe something is on their mind, something is triggering them to be this way. And it makes it easy for me to deal with people in general, because I deal with thousands of people a week. Now, weren't you afraid? Let's get back to, so it all started with the gift, this young boy giving you this gift, this amazing gift that when you got back to California, you opened this book, it became your guide, your blueprint. I guess I would like to use the word blueprint, right?
Yeah.
And when you went back, didn't you have any fear going to Pakistan the first time or the second time, or the spiritual part of it just overcame what possible fear that can come your way?
Yeah. I mean, there was fear, and it was just a kind of anxiety. Because when you get out of your comfort zone, so there was that. And then, then it just came second nature. This is just what I do now. I mean, and then, you kind of learn the tricks of the trade at places you can go, and in the airport where you can go, like in Dubai. And I made friends at like the Hard Rock over there, like my friend Sharif, he's from Egypt. And like, he'll see me walking up, and by the time I walk up, he's got a beverage there waiting and a big hug. And
very cool.
If you have the right spirit and you treat people with dignity and respect, people will give the shirt off your back. I've experienced it. Angels emerge everywhere. I remember when this guy Atif Aslam, who was the pop singer from Pakistan, he called me and said, "Hey, I want you to come to England. I'm playing this gig." And so I said, "Okay." So he flew me over to London, and we're driving, and he's like, "Guess where we're going?" And I'm like, to see the Queen? And he's like, "Come on, man." And I go, "To see Peter?" And he's like, "Yes, Peter Gabriel." So wow. He's friends with Peter Gabriel. So we went to Peter Gabriel's house, and just absolutely so impressed. They say don't meet the people that you admire because they could let you down. Not with Peter. No, that was amazing. Just absolutely remarkable. Then we went to his studio, Real World, in Bath, England, and recorded there that song "Dreamer Awakes." In fact, when we played it, we played him another song. It was an Urdu song, or maybe it was a Punjabi song. That's the language they sing in over in Pakistan. And so we play it for Peter, and it was rough, and it had, a Gilby and Matt from Guns N' Roses on it. And it was sort of like we wanted to do this cross-cultural collaboration. So we play it, and then we finish, and Peter's like, "Oh, wow, that's great. I love it." And so I'm going like, "So do you have any ideas? Anything you'd like to add?" And no, it's perfect. And I could tell he did, because creative people, they have it in their eye, but he's a humble guy. And I'm like, he goes, "Well, there is one thing." And it was a great idea for a string arrangement. And he was just, spectacular. And that was an incredible 10 days in London. So I was with Atif for 5 days to do this concert, which was that's a whole other story, because it was one of those sort of, he's a Bollywood singer. So it's these very wealthy, Indian people from India. They hire these pop stars or actors to come for their weddings. Yes, they pay them like $1 million. And it was in London. So that was just a whole, I met some really cool people there, including this Pakistani woman. And, she said, well, where are you going to stay? And I said, I'm not really sure. And she's like, well, you want me to find you a place? Like, oh, no, that's cool. I'll find something. I mean, London's expensive. And, at this point I'm trying to, cleanse and get ready to, move out of my place and go on the great adventure. Anyway, she said, oh, I found a place for you. And I get into the place and I'm like, oh, her name is Farah. I go, Farah, this is way out of my range. And she's like, no, it's taken care of. Don't worry. My family's taking care of it because of, what you're doing with the children in Pakistan. And I'm like, and I had to humbly accept, because that's just part of the deal. When someone goes out of their way for you, I mean, you can't sit there and let your pride get in the midst of it.
No, absolutely.
And so there's so many encounters like that, and I'll never forget that. That was so cool of her. And I ended up, a friend of mine was singing with Roger Waters, so I actually went to go see Roger Waters, my friend Robbie Wyckoff, and at the Wembley Stadium, which was pretty phenomenal, and met some other really cool people. And some of those guys actually ended up playing some benefits. So we had this really weird mix of, you got the guys from Roger Waters band, some guys from Guns N' Roses, the cast of Full House. And this was kind of my little tapestry, here, and Mark Levine was there, and he brought this Egyptian singer, Rami Isam. And it was like, yeah, this is it. It's got to be this eclectic array of, this sort of a love supreme caravan coming together for a common cause. And there's virtually no ego at all. I mean, nothing.
Right.
And we did 3 of those.
Yeah. Very important. You mentioned the word ego. I tell people more than ever now that the biggest change, the biggest shift in my life was when I lost my ego. And I can clearly say that with conviction that I do not have an ego anymore. And it's so liberating not to have an ego. So I totally understand when you say there was no ego. The joy that was around that group was probably unbelievable. The spirit, the connection was probably out of this world.
It was great. Now, it really was.
It was great. I can tell. I wish I was there. Now, each step that you're going through in your life, even in the early days in the 80s when you're in the Hollywood metal scene and growing up, it seems like it was like just a step, like a series of steps. You would go up to the next step, the next step, the next step. And it was just a natural progression of where you're going, and changing your perspective and changing your thought process. When you got to Pakistan was kind of the top of those steps. And then you had another bunch of steps to start climbing up. That's the way I see that analogy. So you're in Pakistan and you move by the, yes, it's a big ladder, right? And thank God it's a big ladder. We never want the ladder to end. So you're in Pakistan and you're being moved by these children. And then you come up with an idea to teach them the arts, right? To teach them what you're great at, which is guitar playing. You're an accomplished guitar player. You're well respected. You, as you say, you write many songs, and this is inside of you. And am I correctly explaining that or presenting that to you now?
What happened was that I wanted to do collaborations with other artists to raise funds for the children. I wasn't thinking about sharing the music with them.
Okay.
Then when I read a story about 2 Afghan girls, sisters, one was 9, one was 13. One was named Parwana, and her name means butterfly, which is why I love the metaphor of the butterfly and the metamorphosis. And her sister's name is Khorshid, which means the sun. And they were killed in a suicide bomb attack by the Taliban. That was September 8th, 2012. And I just felt such a loss of words. And I've been reading so many stories about, children and people living in poverty and war. And for some reason, this one just took it to another level. Mm-hmm. And I just put it out there. Like, I just feel like I got to meet this family. And so I met somebody who said, come on over and I'll take you to meet them. So I went to meet them, and one of their sisters, who was 8 at the time of this attack. And of course, in addition to that, I in this article, they talked about some veterans that knew the girls, and they wrote, this one in particular named Brad Pupello wrote a beautiful article about them and how just they were brave and incredible. And they were like his best friends, and what a horrible loss. And so I contacted Brad, and you can imagine him, like, and I really was difficult getting a hold of him. And then when I said, hey, I used to be on this TV show Full House, then he's like, someone's not going to make something up about that. And so he was pretty impressed by that. But impressed by the fact that this weird musician would want to go to Afghanistan to meet the family of these girls from a story that he wrote. And he was actually at our benefits as well, and he spoke. And we got some great footage of him talking about the girls too, when my friend of mine came out and shot some footage. But so I go up there to this really poor, really dangerous area. Now, of course, I don't really, I wouldn't do it now because I wouldn't want to put somebody else at risk. Mm-hmm. But at that point, I didn't know any better. So I go up and I meet the family, and it was just profound. And the mother,
I understand.
Very complex story, but initially it was very pure, very beautiful. But different people handle their trauma in different ways. Mm-hmm. So at this point, it was a mother. The mother had 12 children. 6 of them have died either because of war or poverty. The husband was a very violent man. He ended up leaving the family. He was an opium addict, and so they were up in this area where they were living in a one-room place, no kitchen, no running water, no bathroom, nothing. And so I just said, what can I do? And she said, well, you can, get us another house and, get my children into school. And so I had brought a guitar with me, and the sister that survived that attack said, are you going to be my teacher? And I guess that's like where it, I came back. And I was doing one of my little meditative walks where I lived in Long Beach, California. And that's when Girl with a Guitar popped into my head, because I had already thought of Miraculous Love Kids when I met the kids, but this one was like, because the rights of girls over there is abominable. It was abominable before the Taliban. Now it's untenable. They're like in the biggest prison in the world right now in Afghanistan, basically. Millions and millions of girls over there. So, that's kind of how that organically all came to be. So I went back. The first time I went there was March 6th, 2014. March 8th, when I met this girl, Mursal, who was the survivor of that attack, who's killed her sisters, that was International Women's Day. So it was like, wow, that was a pretty cosmic moment. And I was a short trip, 5-day trip. And so I come back, I don't know how to, I've never done the fundraising thing before. My friend Todd does all that. And I was just coming over, to help him. And he's like, man, you got to do your own thing now. And so I just did a GoFundMe, and we raised $10,000. And then I had no contact with the family because they didn't have a phone, and they don't speak, any English, and I didn't speak any Dari. So, when I came back June of 2015 was so that was about 15 months. I had the money, and I said, "You guys ready to move?" And the next day we moved them into a new place, paid for a year, got them registered in school. I mean, $10,000. I mean, then I gave them I give them $200 a month. So that was whatever, 2,500 plus paid 2,500, so 5,000 in the school. So that took care of them for about a year and a half. That 10,000.
Unbelievable! What a rewarding experience. And when you started to tell the story from the beginning, when the young girl asked you, "Are you going to be my teacher?" Did that melt your heart? Did that just say, "I'm in the right place right now. I know what I have to do." The innocence of that child and this is my mission now. Was that something that you felt at that moment?
Yeah. And she's the first one I think that called me Mr. Lanny. I just said, my name's Lanny. I'm from America. And they're like, okay, Mr. Lanny. And that's what the kids all call me. And so usually they call you, it's funny, little sidebar with the language over there. So usually they call you uncle, or if you're, older, they'll call you Haji, because Haji is like, you've gone to Hajj. So it's kind of a great, the smaller children will call you that. Even though I have never been to Hajj, I'd like to go to Hajj, in Saudi Arabia and all that. But anyway, usually they call you uncle, but in their language, it's kaka.
Kaka.
Kaka is the name for uncle. I went to visit these children in Kabul, and they were special needs children, disabled. And this one boy kept going, Kaka Psycho, Kaka Psycho. And I'm like, I asked the guy that's running the organization, I go, why is he calling me Kaka Psycho? And he's like, oh no, he's saying, uncle, look. This boy was looking at all the birds flying outdoors. So that became my nickname for a while, Kaka Psycho. So when I explained to them that I told them what Kaka meant, and then I told them that psycho is like a slang word for crazy, they just thought that was hilarious. So they've got a really incredible sense of humor over there. And that's the word for funny is mazaki. So, and Duktar is girl. So, and of course they laugh because I'm sure my accent is just abominable, but I do my best, and I try to stumble graciously through the language. But anyway, this girl Mursal, and there was a handful of them, and I taught them English, started teaching them guitar, but a lot of times we would spend time just talking about their life. And I was helping to raise them. It wasn't easy because I have no background in this, but just to be present and try to stay calm as they're, trying to deal with their trauma and test boundaries and live in a place where girls are, married off, when they're 14, 15 years old. I actually had to end up stopping this girl from getting married. And that was a whole deal. And then it just got to be where I couldn't keep up anymore, because once you do that, you make a lot of enemies, as you can imagine.
Right. Sure.
I think, as we talked before, you have to decide, like, okay, am I going to step outside and do the right thing? Especially because this girl, everything that she'd been through, and we were really connected because after this whole ordeal went down, she left her mother, and then she was in this, she was staying with her sister. And then my brother had passed away. This was 2019 on the same day as her sister, September 8th. My brother passed 2019. So it was like 7 years apart. 7 is a very mystical number. And this date, September 8th, and she came over and she's crying and she's like, my Uncle Dominic my sisters are meeting Uncle Dominic now. And it was just goodness. Like, I know, you cannot make this stuff up, brother. And I have this incredible picture of her looking at, my brother was an artist, and of his art. And then I have a picture of him in our studio. It's beautiful. So yeah, that's
first, my condolences about your brother, first of all. But when you're on the path that you're on, these wonderful gifts happen, right? Isn't it amazing how they just appear out of nowhere? And
well, my brother was the first one to get it. My rest of my family didn't get it first. They were, understandably, it's like, what? He's lost his mind. He's going to go teach guitar in Afghanistan for nothing. It's so, but now they're my biggest supporters. My mom and my dad and stepdad, my sister, all of them, they're all just down with the cause. And, now they've seen the vision come to fruition. And so it's, but my brother Dominic, totally, he just got it. And, when I was in Pakistan and after that all went down, my mom said, would you write a song for your brother? And I'm like, oh, you didn't just say that. That is like, I don't like, that's just, that's really tough. But I was in Pakistan, and there was this composer from Iceland named, what is his name? Let me see. I have it. Well, anyway, it's an Icelandic composer, and he had this piece of music, and the words just poured out. And it's like, and he had passed away right around the same time as my brother did. same
Wow.
age as my brother. And so it was almost like these beautiful ghosts, helping
guiding you through.
Yeah.
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 Incredible. Unbelievable. What a unbelievable. I don't even know what to say except
It's
unbelievable.
such
And I hate to keep
it's
saying unbelievable, but
it's a mystical journey.
it's a mystical journey. Absolutely. So after you took care of that family for the year, emotionally, you were very attached to them, I'm sure. And you came back to the States, correct? After okay. And obviously must have been very hard to leave them because you became their benefactor, their patriarch, their family, whatever we want to call it, but you became part of the family. So you came back to the States and you had a yearning that you knew you had to go back. Am I correct there? This is now your life, correct?
Oops, something just popped up here. The first thing they did, and I had thought about it, and I said, well, if this goes the way I think it's going, then I already had the answer. But the first thing they said to me wasn't, hi, how are you? They said, when are you leaving? Like they're just like, and no, you can't leave. And so, they go, we really want you to be a teacher. And I said, I goes, are you guys serious now? Cause I mean, if I'm going to be a teacher, man, this is going to be like,
right.
You're going to have to practice and you're going to have to really, these are, at this time, Ursula was, I think, 10. And then she had brought some of her friends. So, and it was the group of girls that usually were in that area. And so a lot of them have survivor's guilt. There was Mersal and these 3 other girls. And so it was little gang of them that came up and, and so I just said, okay. So I went back and I put on a benefit. And I said, okay, well, if we raise this amount of money, then I'm moving out February 1st. The place that I've lived in for years in Long Beach, California. We did, and all the signs pointed in the direction. And I didn't know where I was going to stay. I didn't really know that many people over there, but I just took the leap of faith. And so I got a person working with me, and the girls would come over with their mothers. I had 4 of them to start with. In a month, we had about 25. A couple of months, we had 40. And then right before COVID hit, there was hundreds coming through. Our model was like, basically, they're street kids. So they're working on the street for money. So my thing is, okay, well, you come here. How much are you making? You're making $2 a day. All right. You come here, learn guitar and English, and I'll give you $2 for that day.
Wow.
And then if you do really well, then you're going to start getting more. So we're sponsoring them. And so that was the model. Number 1, well-being, education, music, getting them off the streets because it's very dangerous. Explosions everywhere, kidnappings, molestations, you name it. The nastiness is out there, and these girls are extremely vulnerable. And most of them weren't going to school. And so that was, it was just humbling. And when these mothers would come in with their daughters, because people are like, oh, these people are going to kill you, they're going to run you out, right. And I'm like, not only did that not happen, it was a complete opposite. These people were happy that I cared and I was there to help. And they could feel the sincerity. And so they would weep these tears, and they come in, and some of them with no arms, and, some of them with just wounds in their legs. And usually Afghan women don't lift up their, dress or whatever to show you their wounds. But, they could feel that I wasn't there for anything other than to help. And then I made friends with a bunch of doctors. So then I'd bring them in to meet the doctors and help on that front, and dermatologists, because some of them had skin issues and, all kinds of stuff. It's really, and then I remember this one man came in with his daughters, and he said, I don't have much time left, and I want you to be my children's father.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
I didn't know what to make of that. And I just said, can you give me a minute? So I went in the other room, and tears coming down. I said a little prayer. What do I do? Then I went back in, and I just said, I hope he looked really sick. And I said, I hope you live forever, but I'll do it on one condition. You're always big father number one, and I'll be small father number two.
Unreal.
And
Unreal.
And to this day, we're supporting that. There's a girl named Fatiha, another one, Hadia, and a little boy named Zamir. And the mother's really wonderful woman. And, this past 7 months, today's been the 7-month anniversary since the Taliban took over. This family has just really stepped up big time. Some of them have not been as strong because they're just the trauma. Some of the girls are doing so well, they're getting impatient with the other ones. So, and we have a word there's a word in Dari that I use called bahana, which means excuse. And they're like, oh, these girls are too bahana, Mr. Lanny. And I said, well, you have to understand that first of all, I've spent a lot of time with you because of her family wasn't so good. So then I taught her English, and now she's kind of my assistant. She's only 16. Her nickname's Jelly Bean. And so she's getting a little impatient with some of the other families that aren't stepping up, because she finally got back with her family because there was a big problem with that. And but she's really doing well. And I said, just have some more patience, and things will happen the way they're supposed to happen. And she's like, well, I contact them and they don't go, and I go, I understand. It's frustrating, but this is part of your job, right? You're my assistant, so you have to listen to me, and I listen to you. You tell me the report. I know the way you feel. I agree with you, but I know it's different because you're there and I'm here, and it's easier for me to say it like this. So they've taught me so much just about how to be more diplomatic and compassionate and all of this. So there's quite a few stories like that, and I mean, when those kids look at you, with that look of like hope, when you
hope and trust,
emanate hope, when you emanate hope and trust, there's nothing better. I mean, I was reared up in the rock and roll scene and did all the cliche rock and roll stuff, and it's vacuous, it's empty, it's overrated, it's dangerous, and it's nothing like being of service to humanity, especially the children, the elderly, the disabled, the vulnerable, the voiceless, when you can be a voice for them, when you can, when somebody comes to your place and, you've got some fruit and some bread and they start falling down, wanting to kiss your feet, I'm like, that's humbling. It's humbling. And it's like, please, no, we're equal. I would hope you do that for me, so.
Amazing. I don't want to go back, but I do want to ask you one question, and then we'll continue at this point now. But when the young girls first got the guitar, when they finally played it correctly, how was that for you?
That was just the first time they play the first E minor chord. It's just like, not only for me, but for them, they're like, oh my God, if I can do this, what else can I do? It's just remarkable. I mean, I taught guitar for a long time, and, when you're getting paid to do it, it's, in a safe area, it's cool. It's a great thing to teach and share music, but to do it with those who would never, ever have the opportunity. So, as they're learning, the songs, and it was, I think the first song I showed them was Bob Marley, Don't Worry About a Thing, Every Little Thing's Gonna Be All Right.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
It just was not, it is amazing. But there was an explosion. It was April 19th, 2016. I'd been there since February 1st. And it was like an earthquake, because coming from California, we know earthquakes quite well. And, but this was not an earthquake. Although they do have a lot of earthquakes in Afghanistan, it was a whole different thing. And it was just like, oh my God, how many people. That was my first experience with a suicide bomb attack. And it was close to our place. It was in the morning. And so I'm just thinking, I'm like, okay, we got to do so the first song that came into my mind was Fragile by Sting. Blood will flow and flesh and steel are one, drying in the color of the evening sun. Tomorrow's rain will wash the stains away, but something in our minds will always stay. Perhaps this final act was meant to clinch a lifetime's argument. Nothing comes from violence, nothing ever could. For all those born beneath an angry star, lest we forget how fragile we are. And of course, those are pretty sophisticated lyrics. And of course, I didn't think about that. But you know what? It was a good decision because I never dumbed it down for them. Right. I always wanted to smart it up. I wanted to push them. I said, I'm going to push you. And so, my thinking is if they can play in tune, if they can play in time, and they can play the right chords, I don't really care what comes out of their mouth. Whatever melody comes out, it is what it is. So we did that, and it was a kind of a joyful racket, and then we went to go to the presidential palace, and we played for the former first lady, and the girls did great. They're very poised, and the first lady came up and she said, "You girls are really good on guitar, but you really need to practice your singing." And they were like, "Oh, well, how dare she? How we're great singers." And they look at me and I'm like, "No, girls, it's not great. It's great what you're doing, but the sound is not great." So, well, what do we do? I said, well, when we get back next time, we're going to start the next phase. And that's when they started learning. Blood will flow. They would just learn 3 notes at a time until they got it all down. And that was sort of our model. And then once they kind of get that, then we did Love and Mercy and by Brian Wilson. And how cool is this? This is the first song that they ever recorded. Brian in LA, girls in Kabul do Love and Mercy with Brian Wilson. That's the first song ever recorded.
Unbelievable. I saw the video. It's incredible.
So yeah, Mersal is I think I might maybe mentioned to you, she's the very first girl in the very first scene walking into our place on that video. And so that was the beginning of these collaborations with these renowned musicians. The next song we did was with Sweet Dreams, the Eurythmics song. And the part that I love that it gets drowned out in their version is the part she's like, "Hold your head up, so we really enunciated, "Hold your head up, keep your head up," because there's some of them that want to abuse you and and all of this kind of stuff. But in spite of all these obstacles, you got to keep your head up. Don't let them drag you down.
Right.
Sweet dreams are made of this. I mean, it's kind of a double entendre. It's like a nightmare, but there's still wisdom, to be gleaned from that nightmare. And so we were lucky to get a great drummer named Chris Myers from a band called Humphreys McGee. And we got Kathy Valentine from the Go-Go's on bass. And so we had a go-go, and we got a bangle, Vicki Peterson, remarkable guitarist and remarkable woman playing guitar. Then we got Wayne Kramer, who is a great guitar player from a band called MC5, and Rami Jaffe from the Foo Fighters on the keyboards, and Mr. Tom Morello.
Mr. Tom Morello.
From Rage Against the Machine. And Tom not only came on board as a musician, he's been a spokesperson for us as well. And did some interviews that we did with the BBC and all of that. And he's just such an eloquent, wonderful guy. And so Jelly Bean, she was in and out for a while, but luckily she was in this. She's very good. And so her first video, she was in the Love and Mercy video, but that's when she kind of first started. So, but at this point she's elevated. So and really her first video that she's kind of featured in, there's a split screen of her and Tom sharing the lead guitar part. So that's another moment for me of just like, couldn't be any prouder of that.
Unbelievable. So as of how many young ladies do you have now in the program in Afghanistan? How large is it right now?
Well, we're supporting hundreds, but obviously there's no music going on anymore. So we're going to get out, as many as we can, however we can. Hopefully we can do it through, the passport visa channel, but if we can get them out through other ways, then we're going to do that, because they're basically living, like I said, in a prison. I'm their lifeline. I mean, I don't know what it would be like, because it's tough enough even though they have me to speak to. There's a lot of the girls that don't speak enough English, and my Dari is not enough to, communicate at a deeper level. So, I mean, really it's turned into, it'll be probably 20 girls doing the guitar that I'll spend more time with wherever we get them. And then the rest will be just to support them to, get through until we can get them out, and then see where it goes from there. But yeah, it's extremely, as you know, dangerous. So one of the girls, I asked all of them when I left, or when I actually was on the last commercial flight out, not knowing the Taliban were coming in. Otherwise, I would have made other arrangements and whatnot, but that wasn't meant to be. And so I told all of them, get rid of your guitars, number one. Well, they didn't all listen to me. And then the Taliban recently started going house to house. So they got rid of them. And one of the girls, oh my God, she was just so broken up. I mean, they sent me a video. She was so distraught. This guitar was given to her by a good friend of ours, Colonel John Pumphrey, who's a Canadian colonel from Canada. And so, she loved that guitar, but I left her a little message, just saying, hey, when you get through this, we're going to get you another guitar. Colonel John understands. And, but this is how cruel these people are. I may not sound like a big deal in the whole scheme of things, but for a 13-year-old
big
girl,
deal. It's a big deal.
Her lifeline. And she was still practicing, but the father did the right thing, because, I asked them to do that because, the last thing I would want is anything to happen to them, because number one, their most important thing is their life, their kids. They'll pick back up, and they're going to be better than ever. And their story is going to be remarkable of everything they've gone through and everything they've seen. This came out in May. We did Fly Like an Eagle, the Steve Miller song, which,
amazing. I saw it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's sort of the sacred recipe, I think, of humanity in that song, where he says, feed the babies who don't have enough to eat, shoe the children with no shoes on their feet, house the people living in the street. And the girls, trade off with Sammy and Chad Kruger from Nickelback, and
Sammy Hagar, correct?
Sammy Hagar from Van Halen is singing on it. Sammy was just remarkable and agreed to do it, and was and Rami Jaffe was on that too, from Foo Fighters, and the great bass player Nathan East plays with Eric Clapton and Phil Collins. I mean, these kids have played with all these legends.
Amazing.
It really is. And they deserve it, because when you hear the progression from Love and Mercy to, Sweet Dreams, and then Fly Like an Eagle. And that's when we did the Good Morning America program. And that's when I met Kiefer Sutherland. And Kiefer has come on board as a spokesperson as well. Another remarkable guy, like Tom Morello, like Sammy Hagar, like Vicki Peterson, who not only, did songs with the girls, but also became people for them. And so then we recently just released a couple of weeks ago a Tom Morello song to thank him for everything he's done for us. And another musician that's come on board with us, an incredible musician named John Andrasik from the band Five for Fighting. He's really been an advocate for the Afghan people and Afghan musicians. So he's featured on that, along with Beth Hart, Victoria Williams, Nils Lofgren, plays with Springsteen and Neil Young.
Yes.
And Julian Baker, another great singer. Oh, and then this little wonderkin, Nandi Bushell, who she's a multi-instrumentalist, but she's from England, and she's a really great drummer. She's 11, and she does these drum battles with Dave Grohl and Roger Taylor from Queen, and it's and her mother and father are just remarkable. So I think all of them are a little bit nervous to do stuff right now, which I understand, until the girls are out. And so when the girls are out, they're going to have so many cool people that are going to want to jam with them. And then Nandy's already, the father said, let's write a song together with all the girls, and when they get out, and all that kind of stuff. So And then we have a song with Nick Cave, who's one of my favorites. It's an original song that Nick and I wrote. It's called, Breathless Beautiful. And the basic premise of the song is, I think Nick wrote it for his wife, and he said he could never find a melody. And I read it, and to me, it was like, even no matter how bad things get or a loss of somebody, there's always a sacred chamber in the heart where that can exist and live and reside. And that's where that song, it's just exquisite. I really want that to get the proper attention, because that's really sort of our first original song. And with Nick Cave, I mean, geez, that's just mind blowing. But then the other ones
can't wait to hear it.
Recorded. Yeah. And then we've got a song with Blake Shelton. We're doing Tom Petty's I Won't Back Down. And then another singer from a group called Portishead named Beth Gibbons. We're doing David Bowie's Heroes. And it's like I started directing myself because, well, I was the only one available and around, and I know the song so well, and I know we have limited footage. So, and then we got to the point where it's like, well, we don't have, because I have to get equal screen time for all the girls. So all the other directors are way better than me, but they don't know the girls' names, and there's a lot of dynamics and confidence building that goes with it. So I had to go into my own little, flip cam iPhone files and find some footage to fill it out. And it really is cool. I'm really pleased with it. So we've got an album's worth of material, once they're out, and we find the right way to put that out there. And we have plans for however we can tell this story, documentary, series. I mean, I think a documentary would be great, because that would take everything up till now, and then the series about where do we go from here, because a lot of them want to go with me to Iraq. They want to go with me to Yemen. They want to go with, of course, they want to go to America. And it would be great to have a whole series just seeing like little Alice in Wonderlands, discovering America, going to the Grand Canyon and Zion and Sun Studios. And,
it'll be amazing. It'll be incredible. It's the reason why I'm doing this and it's kind of taken a life of its own since I started. And the reason why I'm doing it, not just to have a podcast and try to hopefully entertain and inspire people, but to act as an advocate for our guests as well. And I bring this up to you now because I really can't get into too much detail to protect some people, but we'll talk about it offline, but we have some people that may be able to help get the girls out. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is I'm part of a company, thankfully, and I'm grateful to be part of it, that does basically all of the touring across the country. And we know every tour manager and everybody in the business, as you do too. But the ideal situation would be, once we get the girls back, and we will get the girls back, to do a tour. And do a tour. I like to call this thing I'm speaking about, that I can't get into too much detail with you now, but a marriage of humanity. It's a perfect marriage of humanity that just came about because I met you and I met others, and people are aware of this podcast being recorded today, and they're very eager to hear it. And we'll be in touch about this when we're finished. I guarantee you that.
Yeah.
What you're doing is extraordinary. Where can we find these videos of all this great work you've done, and the great work that the young ladies have done as well?
On our website, which is miraculouslovekids.org. And I have a YouTube channel as well, so under Lanny Cordola. But yeah, miraculouslovekids.org is where a lot of information, the videos and whatnot. I haven't done too much. I mean, some people had concerns like, well, you should take the website down. And I'm like, if I take it down, that's their lifeline, because that's where the funds come in. And I'm still raising funds to support them now. And we got to have a little nest egg. We can't just all of a sudden, hey, here we are, because then they're just going to be refugees thrown into camps. So we decided together, I asked all of them to talk to their parents, and they were really funny. They said, well, Mr. Lanny, we know you're a famous man in America. And I said, well, no, I'm not really a famous man in America, but thank you. Flattery will get you some places. And they said, but we don't think the Taliban are like looking at the website and your YouTube channel.
What courage.
I said, yeah. And also, so that people would know, I mean, they do not leave their house without being fully covered, and they are with their fathers. And
they're protected.
Yeah. And when the Taliban did come into their house, they're all covered. So even if they went on a girl hunt to find them, it would be, needle in a haystack stuff.
Right,
and
right.
They've got much bigger problems right now. And we're not actively doing it. I actually had the presence of mind to shoot 6 videos and record 6 songs 2 days before I left. Now, the girls were all telling me, Mr. Lanny, Taliban are coming. And I'm like, oh, come on, my little drama queens. It's going to be okay. Because there was no reports that they were going to come that quick. They said the soonest, and it would be a bloody battle, would be 3 months. And I was going to be back in 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. So I listen to them now. When they tell me stuff, I listen because they're there. And I think that the energy of kids are more in tune with certain frequencies and vibrations that we lose as we get older. That part of our brain shuts down. And so, to get back to that sort of, that's that way of being is to really, listen to them.
Listen to them. So, yes, absolutely. Well, we're going to run the website and your YouTube channel and graphics on this podcast once we edit it. But I have 2 things I want to commit myself to you here with. And the first thing is, of course, what I mentioned to you that I really can get into detail with you right now. But the second thing I can get into detail with you is that we have some people who are interested in possibly donating substantially to your cause, and we'll introduce you to these folks properly. I know that they'd be very interested in what you're doing. And I have the feeling that we're going to be able to help you fund what you're doing and continue your great work. And you and I are good friends now. We'll be even better friends. So we'll be talking, we'll be speaking a lot.
Over here.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. So I'll be sharing a lot of these things with you in our private conversations, but I really want to thank you. When I say courage too, you're courageous. You are, to change the direction of your life with something you believe in is extraordinary. And your courage, it can't even be explained. It can't even be presented in words. So I really want to thank you today for your time.
Well, thank you.
It's been a perspective change for me as well, even listening to you and hearing what you've done. And I thank you for your time, Lanny. I
thank you. And really, I also want to thank Michael.
Cousin Michael, who introduced us. Absolutely. My genius of a cousin, Michael Giganti, a great musician, a great songwriter.
Yes.
Wonderful human being. Yes. He stayed with me last week. He's had it was great for him. I actually told him he stayed with me for about 4 or 5 days last week. And I told him before he left, I was so happy he was here. We really enjoyed each other. Yeah. And it was a wonderful time together. And I can't wait for him to come back. I'm very proud of my cousin, Michael.
So I was thinking about him. And then he reached out and then he told me about you. It really is mystical. I just, there's a lot of agony, and then there's a lot of, ecstasy or just
absolutely
connecting to that higher source. So I think that's really, to encourage others to find that, that mystical, I guess that's kind of our theme today. So we'll go with it, but, find that mystical voice. And that will help guide you, because so many people are really suffering right now. That's why we released this song, God Help Us All, not just for the children of Afghanistan, which is obviously now a call for the children of Ukraine and, of course, Syria, Yemen, and Libya, and Somalia, and America, and the children in Honduras and Mexico and all over the place. There's the children and even the Western countries. There's an epidemic of suicides, and their souls are aching, and we've got to be there for them. And
we do. So it's our responsibility. It really is.
It is. And it's Miraculous Love Kids is for everybody, and so we'll explore that more as things unfold. And but thank you and your crack team and what you're doing with shining a light. I like to call it the Rebels of Light. Rebels of Light Unite. It's our time now.
It's our time now. And I couldn't have said it any better. And I thank you, Lanny. It's our time now. That's how we'll end it. It's our time now.
It's our time now.
Thank you, Lanny. God bless you.
All right, buddy.
And thank you for joining us on another episode of Our Fighting Spirit. We'll see you again next time, and keep fighting and keep winning.